Canadians is Amanda Achtman. How you doing?
Hi, Ezra. Good to see you again.
We're in London at what I think is becoming the world's leading conservative conference. Tell me what you're up to.
It's amazing to see so many people from so many walks of life and countries. What a reunion here, working on all kinds of issues: education, family, culture, politics, and this whole vision toward telling a better story. A posture of confidence is palpable. This is what has changed. Now, no longer in a position of insecurity and tepidity, people are starting to find their courage and act with boldness. That's what I noticed here.
Wow.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Now, last we spoke, you're working on fighting against MAID, medical assistance in dying, which is the latest euphemism for mercy killing, but they have so many phrases, and once it gets too toxic, they discard it for a new one. Medical assistance in dying. It sounds so medical, but it's really just doctor, this Jack Kevorkian stuff.
Now we're in the UK, and the word here is assisted dying. This is an issue right now being discussed by many people in England who are concerned that there's a risk of following suit. Canada is, on the one hand, a cautionary tale of what not to do, and has in many respects led to countries staving off the euthanasia experiment in their own places. But the UK is on the brink, and it's passing through Parliament. So there's a lot of discussion here about euthanasia. I'm finding many people working on this, concerned about it, and Canada is the warning. So I'm grateful that we can stand as a sign of what not to do, but it also tells us how much work we have to do, given that 1 in 20 deaths is a euthanasia death in Canada. And so this is touching so many people, to the extent that I recently met a man for coffee, just a few years older than me, and he told me that 3 out of 4 of his grandparents were killed. 2 of his grandmothers within 8 months. This is shattering. And I'm grateful that this is a gathering where we're learning that we belong to one another, that there's a social fabric, that there are things we actually seek to conserve as conservatives, that life has dignity, that hope needs to be reawakened. So it's a great forum for delving into all of these themes.
Well, I mean, that's crazy. If 1 out of 20 deaths is doctor assisted dying, like that's got to be more than many forms of cancer or other disease. That's crazy. Last question. J.D. Vance came to Munich last week at a security conference. He talked about freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and democracy. He didn't actually talk that much about security. I think the U.S. is reclaiming sort of its global mantle of moral leadership. I don't think you're going to see a globo-cop. I don't think you're going to see American empire with tanks and invasions. Trump's not that way. But in the form of Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and even Elon Musk, I think you're seeing ideas being exported. At least that's how it feels to me. What's your observation about that?
Certainly, countries are taking note and wondering, are our countries also worthy of protection? Do we have a national identity that we want to safeguard? Is there a vision around which we can coalesce as a basis for integrating, such that people kind of fall away by their own decision if they don't opt into some set of shared values? And I have been grateful as well to see the emphasis on combating anti-Semitism in all the respective contexts in which this has become a massive global crisis. And regimes will begin to differentiate themselves for a kind of moral sanity in the face of this new anti-Semitism, which is old but always mutating into new forms. And I'm just so grateful to see that this has been on a lot of people's radar here, and has been a basis for some of the concerns and discussion around security.
What were you doing in prison?
I went to visit one of the federal prisons in Canada, in Saskatchewan, and there I actually had the occasion to meet 2 men serving life sentences. These are Indigenous men in a prison that is a predominantly Indigenous population there, and I was able to discuss euthanasia with them and to ask if they had heard about our so-called medical assistance in dying, which they had. How? There's very tight security and there's no media, they're not on the internet. They had heard about Canada's euthanasia program from the CBC. Imagine prisoners serving life sentences, and where does the idea become planted that they could have not capital punishment, which has become illegal in Canada, but a kind of voluntary capital punishment of euthanasia. They learned about it on TV in prison, catching wind about Canada's euthanasia program from the CBC. That is terrifying, and that is deeply saddening. Now, when I spoke with them, I asked them, do you see a value to your own life? One of the men said, well, I wake up each day, I'm breathing, I hope so. How can these Indigenous men who are serving life sentences see more clearly the value of life than those who are trying to propagate our euthanasia society? This visit moved me very deeply, and I realized that for many prisoners, if a prisoner is actively showing signs of suicidality, they will actually put that person in an isolation room with a camera to kind of monitor that they don't harm themselves. It's not necessarily the best remedy. And yet, if someone asks for euthanasia, there's a doctor who will come, they'll be made comfortable. It's almost like assisted suicide is the more accompanied form of dying. And so we're really abandoning the most vulnerable, including prisoners. And it's been a couple years since we've seen data on how many prisoners have opted for euthanasia in Canadian prisons. This demands more investigation.
I bet they're pushing it. How could they not?
It's
I mean,
a risk.
From a budget point of view, from a hassle point of view, it's in the government's interest to get these people to kill themselves.
It is so sad. And yet when I visited these men, I gleaned so much from them because, again, they're capable of seeing a certain value to their life, even though they're in prison. Let me tell you, I asked one of the men, what do you miss most about your freedom? And this man said, I miss being able to take out the garbage when I want to do it. Who is asking for euthanasia today relishes getting to take out the garbage on their own terms? And so we have so much to learn from those who are at greatest risk of being discarded, dismissed, and discounted in our society. And what might we lose if we eschew that?
Wow. Thanks for telling that story.
You bet. Thanks.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.